Let's talk virtualization. I'll start with the thank you for coming and then an apology because I really would have liked to get this session scheduled yesterday before you guys all went to Paul's keynote and then to Steve's keynote. Because if you guys are coming to this session and getting a basic introduction to virtualization and you went to Paul's keynote, that stuff's tough for even VMware employees to follow sometimes. So this will hopefully answer a lot of the questions that you got as a result of going to sessions yesterday and as a result of the keynotes that you went to both this morning and yesterday morning or yesterday afternoon. I am Tim Steffen, Senior Director of Product Marketing for vSphere, vCloud Director, and vCenter. So that's the basic core virtualization infrastructure that powers cloud computing. And we're going to talk mainly about that layer here. What is virtualization? What does it do? Who is VMware? And how can I benefit from this technology? It's a very, very introductory session. So if you know what a hypervisor is, if you know what a virtual machine is, if you have some idea of those two concepts, you're probably good. But if you've used VMware products in the past, this might be a refresher at best for you. So let's get started. Disclaimer. Goals for the session. Basically, my fundamental goal is for you guys to come away and say, I know what virtualization is. I can explain it to my parents, to my kids, and they're going to know what products I'm working on. The target for this session really is my mom. So she knows where I work and how she can explain it to all her friends. But we really want you to understand what virtualization is, what the benefits of that technology are, and how it can benefit you. And what is vSphere? What is this nebulous product that has all these different components? And how do I acquire this product? How can I get started with these solutions? Because there's a lot going on. As you saw with Paul's keynote yesterday, and if you've been following our launches over the last couple months, we recently in July announced the Cloud Infrastructure Suite. And that's a full suite of products that together enables our customers to start to realize the benefits of cloud computing in their own data center, with a service provider, or through a hybrid cloud approach today. These are real products now. This is a real suite of infrastructure solutions that can enable cloud computing now. But there's a lot here, right? vSphere 5.0, the new release of the virtualization platform. vCenter SRM, Site Recovery Manager, a disaster recovery solution. vCenter Operations, a new management tool that really helps you analyze the performance of your infrastructure. vShield 5, a way to incorporate security into your virtualization infrastructure to enable a more secure environment in a virtualization infrastructure than you can get in a physical infrastructure. And vCloud Director, which enables you to take this pool of resources and create virtual data centers targeted to specific customers in your industry. So finance, or I should say in your employer. So finance might require certain SLAs. Your marketing department might require different resources. You can create different data centers for those two groups. But that's a lot, right? And that's the cloud infrastructure launch. And then if you take that component, that's just the blue part right there on the bottom. And then we've got Cloud Application Platform, where you can develop applications that realize the benefits of cloud computing and take advantage of those benefits. And then on top, you've got end-user computing, knowing that everyone I know brings an iPad to a meeting now instead of their laptop. There are going to be different types of devices to access different types of information, and these apps in your infrastructure need to support all those different devices. Right? And then you've got the secure private cloud as you build that in your internal data center. You've got the public cloud providers here where you can outsource your IT requirements and utilize IT services by a service provider, kind of like a utility. And then you can combine all this across your internal data center with an external data center and create the hybrid cloud so you can leverage the best of both. Right? So that's the ideal goal, but that's a lot to take in. So let's take a step back. Let's talk about virtualization and how it enables this type of solution. So what exactly is virtualization? Just to define it, right? In the old school physical world, and as you've seen from the keynotes and probably from some of our other presentations, virtualization is the new norm. It's the new standard platform. The majority of new applications in a data center are deployed on a virtual infrastructure. The majority of existing applications now this year are in a virtual environment. Virtualization is just saying, hey, in a physical world, you can only have one application per physical server. The operating system was what talked to the hardware, and due to potential conflicts between applications, you could only have one application on each server, which left a lot of these large, powerful servers very, very underutilized. So what we're doing now, at a very base level, is inserting a virtualization layer between the operating system and the hardware and allowing many, many applications to run on a single server independently. So one server acts like 10 or 20 or 50 now, and in some cases with these high memory systems with 12-core processors. So to put it more visually, you had the traditional architecture right here, operating system, an application, hardware. Here you've got a VMware solution, the hypervisor, with virtual machines. And a virtual machine is defined as an application and an operating system in its own contained software package. So you've got virtual machines talking to VMware, talking to the hardware, all acting independently on a single physical server. Now that's the base level benefit of virtualization. So instead of 100 servers for 100 applications, you need 10 servers for 100 applications. Or soon maybe you'll only need one server. How did we get there? Well, round one was the client hypervisor. That was where you put a virtualization layer on top of the host OS. So you've still got Windows or Linux there running on the operating system, and you put this virtual layer on top of that, and then you put the virtual machines on top of that. It's a little more inefficient, right? Because you've still got this dependency on the operating system. Anything that affects that operating system, whether it be a security breach or a patch requirement, requires all these virtual machines to be rebooted, so you don't have the uptime. Right? So there were some limitations, but that was our first step. And we do still have products that run this infrastructure or this type of architecture. Workstation is one, and you run it on your laptop. You could run Linux on Workstation or a different version of Windows than is on your laptop. And Fusion, too. Fusion allows you to run Windows in a virtual machine on your Mac. And if I go to anyone, if we talk at colleges or anything, that's what they think we are. Oh, VMware, yeah, you can run it on a Mac. That makes like 0.5% of our revenue, but it's what we're known for. So you can still get those types of architectures, right? Second was the server hypervisor. And this is the first bare metal hypervisor, and that's ESX. Much more efficient because there is no operating system dependency between ESX and the hardware. So we completely removed the operating system. ESX was a very thin layer for its time, but it still had a dependency on Linux to boot. So there was a component of Linux there which did cause ESX to be a little bit more, it had more patches, or we'll put it that way. So if you had to patch the Linux component, you did have to patch ESX. But this is still the predominant hypervisor that the majority of our customers run today, although that's changing very quickly, because now we've evolved to offer ESXI, which completely removes that service console component of ESX, and it makes it a very, very thin layer. Every line of code there is only there for virtualization. There's no other operating system on it. So where ESX was about 2 gig in size, ESXi is about 80 meg. That's it. So it's very, very secure. You don't have to patch it much. And that means that your applications are very efficient running in that configuration. And there's a very little downtime due to hypervisor patching. So that's the architecture. That's the hypervisor. And the way you configure your infrastructure, you deploy that hypervisor on every single one of your physical servers, run virtual machines on that, and then manage that through Virtual Center, which is the management console. So you can manage all those single virtualized servers as a single infrastructure, or a combined infrastructure. What are the key properties of virtual machines? One is partitioning, and that's what I've been talking about so far. You can take a single server, run 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 different applications on that server independently. So you don't need 100 servers for 100 apps, you need 10. And it's getting better all the time. Next point, isolation. Every virtual machine on a server is independent from the other virtual machines on that server, no matter how many that you have. So if you've got 10 virtual machines on a single virtualized host, those 10 virtual machines do not know about the other machines. The only way they'd know is if you had a network connection between the two virtual machines, the same way you would configure it in a physical world. So they're completely isolated from the others. Encapsulation is another very important property because you've got a whole server stored as software. The hardware configuration, the operating system, the application and all its configuration is stored as software. And you can drag and drop, copy it just as you would other files. So you can make backups of servers. Something happens to that virtual machine, you restore it from a previous configuration, which is great for deploying patches, updates. So if something happens during that update, you just roll back to the old version and start again. And hardware independence. This is very, very important when you create pools of resources, as we'll talk about soon. And pooling your resources, creating a utility-based infrastructure, is the benefit of cloud computing, and this is what really enables it, the hardware independence. So you can run a virtual machine on one physical host that's virtualized, move it to another physical host that's also virtualized, and the application doesn't know the difference. It doesn't care. You can do that with downtime. So if the server fails, the application will restart on another server. Or you can just drag and drop it using something like vMotion to migrate a virtual machine, a live running application, to another physical virtualized host with no downtime. So that's very, very important and something that only virtualization really enables. So how important is this to people? Well, it's been a high priority for quite a long period of time. As you'll see, in 2009, virtualization was number 3 from the CIO survey. Cloud computing was 14. 1 year later, cloud computing is number 2, and virtualization is number 1. And I don't have this slide with me, but in 2011, cloud computing is now number 1, virtualization is number 2. So customers are seeing the benefit of virtualization as enabling cloud computing. They see the cost savings, the flexibility it enables, and they want to start their projects towards virtualizing their infrastructure, which is probably why we're seeing so many of you here today, and we do appreciate you coming to learn about the products. There's always just to take a step back, there's always a discussion before VMworld. Do we really need this 101 session? Are there people or do people know this stuff already? But I'm glad we did it today because I'm hoping you guys will benefit from all this. So who is VMware? Probably seen this slide many times, right? Look how great we are, $2.9 billion in revenues and $3 billion in cash and all these great customers. Proven in the trenches, 250,000 customers. Now, I got to VMware 5 years ago, and we were at like 40,000 customers, and we were all excited about that. So it is just growing quickly. But the point isn't to say, look how big and great we are. The point is that if you guys choose to establish your virtualization infrastructure, build your cloud computing infrastructure on VMware solutions, that we're going to be around to partner with you for a long period of time. We're going to have the resources, the R&D, the expertise to continue to develop these solutions so that you can continue to benefit from our technology advances. And it's proven, so you're not taking a risk, right? Other people are already benefiting from our solutions. They've proven that our solutions work in some of the most technically rigorous environments, and they've been successful. So if you choose to work with VMware, you're going to be successful too. Global partner ecosystem. A lot of partners on our floor are sponsoring VMworld. Really appreciate that too. It was a lot of people down there on the service provider floor. A lot of people building solutions that work with VMware products. So that's the point I want to make here, is that people support, they've invested in, they work with our solutions. So you're not going to have to replace your existing hardware to start to virtualize, because we'll support what you have, and you can upgrade your hardware infrastructure on your own time. You don't have to go out and replace your infrastructure just to start virtualizing. Start virtualizing now with what you have today. And I'm not talking just servers, networks, storage, everything. And there are a number of customers, as you work to leverage external cloud resources, there are a number of service providers here that are also investing in building public cloud solutions on top of our infrastructure. Broad software and hardware support in the industry. What good is virtualizing if your applications aren't supported on our infrastructure? So when you virtualize your applications, whether they be from SAP, IBM, Microsoft, even Oracle, you're going to get support from those ISVs as if you were running in a hardware environment. So VMware's products are a fully supported infrastructure, and even for Oracle. And I say even for Oracle because there's always this question, is Oracle really supporting VMware's infrastructure? Well, we've never had a customer refuse support from Oracle. There was even a transcription of a Larry Ellison interview that one customer brought to the Oracle support. It said, here, Larry said he'd support VMware. I don't have that slide either, but I need to get that one. So the point is, majority of business-critical applications and even industry-specific applications here. If you have specific healthcare, finance, manufacturing, telco, retail applications, those will be virtualized too. There's really nothing now that cannot be virtualized, especially with the scale that is inherent in ESXi and the vSphere 5 platform. And then the Gartner Magic Quadrant. Of course, I'll just put that there to say VMware was recognized by the analyst community as having the most proven, robust, reliable cloud infrastructure platform. So enough about us, right? And us, I mean VMware, and what we can do to support you guys. Let's talk about your situation and what we're trying to do to help the IT community. This is the mandate that when I talk to a lot of you, this is what comes back is this is what we're being told to do. And this is just a nice way of saying, do more and we're not going to pay you or give you any budget to do it with, right? Become more strategic. You guys got to be business partners, right, with the business, but we're not going to give you any more resources to do it. So we understand that situation. And just to provide some more detail on that, right? If we talk to a lot of our customers, this is the most important part here, right? 42% of the budget is infrastructure maintenance. 30% of your budget is application maintenance. And then only about 30%, 27% of someone's budget is spent on strategic projects. You know, building better infrastructure, building better applications, deploying things that are going to help the business. More detail. You know, before VMware, server sprawl, 36 million physical x86 servers by this year. 140 billion in excess server capacity in a physical environment. That's because when you can only put one application on these huge servers that are being constructed today, you end up only using 5% of that server's capacity. So you're heating and cooling something that's only at a capacity of about 5%. Not even to talk the power costs for heating and to supporting that excess infrastructure, the space as well. Data centers for protected, secure environments are not cheap to maintain, as you guys all know. And then the operating costs as well. So we understand where you're at. And something's really going wrong, right? And this actually is a secret photo of Microsoft's data center. Sorry, that's my only plug. They filmed a video of us. We can do this. How will virtualization benefit you guys, right? So it's really easy to say, that's your problem. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to reduce the complexity. We're going to lower costs. And we're going to enable flexible, agile IT service delivery. Well, that's really easy to say. It's like when I go to meetings with some of these guys and say, oh, all we need to do is get more customers and lower our costs. Well, that's great. How are we going to do that? That's the key. So let's talk about that. How we are going to start enabling you to lower your costs, reduce the complexity, and enable you guys to become strategic business partners. Well, the benefits of virtualization at a very, very basic level are the following. One is consolidation. Right? This is the majority of customers come to us and say this is what they did first, and this made a huge impact to their overall cost structure and really proved the value of virtualization in their organization and enabled them to expand beyond that initial consolidation of servers. So this is where you go into a data center, take the 1,000 servers, consolidate the applications via a vSphere deployment. So instead of one per server, you're running 10 or 15 per server. And you consolidate the servers down from maybe 1,000 to 100 or less. It's like one of those commercials. I think IBM did it, but it was very, very on point, where the CIO walked in and said, someone stole our data center. And the tech guy comes and says, no, it's running in this little box. That's basically what happens to our customers when they first start to virtualize. Very important step, but not the only benefit of virtualization. Because containment, right? That says you don't have to buy new servers for a long period of time. It just goes hand in hand. You consolidate, you can use your existing infrastructure, and upgrade your hardware on your own terms. Availability. Now, this is really important. We're going to talk about how we enable applications to be much more available in a virtualization infrastructure than they ever could be in a physical environment. And there's one basic reason for that is because the application is not tied to the hardware anymore. The hardware goes down, fails, the application goes somewhere else and continues running. So a lot of our customers, at least, especially in the SMB space, if you've got 30 servers or less, availability is the reason they virtualize. So you have different things for vMotion, high availability, fault tolerance that I'll talk to later. That's some of the benefits. And the results are immediate and transformational. Capital costs cut by 50 to 60%. You can consolidate your data center. Operational costs cut by 25% because you're not supporting those servers anymore. Human resources, 33% reduction in routine administration time. I mean, you'll hear customers all the time say it used to take 2 weeks to provision a new server, even longer to get an application up. Now it takes minutes or days at most, depending on the complexity of the application. That means you guys don't have to spend your time on this. You can spend your time on things much more interesting. And then energy costs, up to 80% reduction in data center energy costs. We've had customers that, and it wasn't just the cost of energy, it was the access to energy. Like they were using as much of the grid as they were enabled to use, and that wasn't enough to support this physical data center. So they had a diesel generator out in front of their data center just pumping in electricity to keep that thing running. And we virtualized them, and they were able to get rid of that the diesel generator. So it's not just the cost it reduces, but sometimes people can't get access, especially with these rolling grayouts or blackouts during the summer. Here's one customer example, customer with 1,000 applications. Before they had 1,000 servers, down to 80. 10 network switches instead of 400. 52 kilowatt hours of power. 64 for cooling. Only a tenth of the real estate. The savings per application was $8,200. Times that by 1,000. That's the impact that virtualization can have immediately. And these are real customer cases, and they're not atypical. So it's a very standard customer. So how do we do that? We do that with vSphere. And vSphere, a lot of people still ask me, what is vSphere? The way I'd mention, or the way I'd explain what vSphere is it's ESXI on a number of virtualized hosts, and then you have vCenter managing those hosts as a single infrastructure. And there are different layers of vSphere, different levels, right? For SMBs, we have smaller packages with enough functionality to let them consolidate. We have Enterprise Plus, which is the complete cloud infrastructure platform. So different layers of vSphere, but vSphere is vCenter plus ESXi, enabling different levels of scalability and functionality. But if we take vSphere as a whole, these are the types of functionality that we're enabling, right? I would combine these or group these into two main categories. One, infrastructure services, compute, storage, and network. And at a high level, what these infrastructure services enable is the pooling of resources into a single utility. So instead of having separate compute servers, separate network switches, and separate storage devices, you have a pool of resources, a utility that your applications use on an as-needed basis. And we'll talk through some of the functionality that enables that. And the application services around availability, security, and scalability enable your apps to run even better in a virtual infrastructure than they could in a physical environment. So forget all the consolidation. Even if you couldn't consolidate your infrastructure from 1,000 servers down to 10, or that's maybe stretching it, 1,000 servers down to 100, it's still better to run applications in a virtual environment. And that's why we're seeing a lot of our customers, after they virtualize the tier 2 or lesser, or the test and dev environments, they move to virtualize Oracle databases or Exchange servers, things that they can't consolidate. But because they have a higher quality of service with those applications running in a virtualized infrastructure, they still choose to virtualize those applications. So let's talk through some of these things. When I talk to abstraction and pooling, two core concepts of cloud computing and virtualization. So here in the traditional view, you've got Exchange on one server, Oracle on another, SAP, and then Siebel on another server. In the virtual infrastructure, you create the pools of resources, interconnect storage, memory, and CPU, run your applications in the virtual infrastructure. And then you use these features and functions, and I'll go through each one in more detail to enable a higher level of service. So hopefully that explains the concept. Now let's talk about how we do it. Well, vMotion, and I'm going to go through some of the features now in more detail. So when you hear these terms, you're able to go, okay, I know the benefit of this, I know what it is. Now, vMotion is our flagship technology. It seems to be really associated with virtualization and associated with VMware. And what that enables is the migration of a running application from one server to the next with no downtime. So because of shared storage, you move from one virtualized host to another, and there's no interruption. So at a very base level, it allows migration of applications with no disruption to the user. At a use case, it means if you're performing server maintenance, there's no need to take down those applications. There's no need to come in the office at 3 a.m. on Sunday, so you're not going to disrupt anyone when you start to work on email. You just move Outlook over to, or Exchange over to a different server, perform the server maintenance, turn this server back on, make it part of the host, and then applications will migrate back to that cluster, or to that server. vMotion, live migration. High availability is another one. This is really important, because this protects you from unanticipated server downtime. It means if you've got an application on a server and that server fails, you didn't know it was going to fail, obviously, so you couldn't prepare for it, but here you're insured against that type of failure. The application on that server that fails will just restart on another server in the vSphere cluster. So there is some downtime in this type of protection, but it does enable that application to recover much faster than in a physical environment where you would need to restart that physical server, repair that physical server before that application could come up. And this is something you can do for your entire infrastructure. Now, there are clustering services or hardware-based type of high availability solutions, but they're more complex and they're expensive. So you'd only protect your most important applications. Here you can protect everything. I was talking to a guy at the booth. He was so excited about this. He said, wow, that's like Viagra for your data center. I didn't stick around to find out more, but so here's an example of that, right? High availability. Distributed resource scheduler. This is what happens when you let engineers name products. We have a great name like vMotion, and now it's the DRS. So just remember that, DRS. This is an extension of vMotion, which enables automatic load balancing of your infrastructure. So I think this is a build slide, but what you're seeing there in that resource pool is that application that flashed red, it all of a sudden needed more resources, which stressed the resource pool available on that single server. So what the applications did, or what the infrastructure did, was to load balance and say, okay, there's excess capacity on these servers over here. I'll move those applications over to other servers to enable every application to have the resources it requires and enable IT to meet its SLA automatically. And a lot of our customers, what amazes me about VMware technology is 4 years ago, this was new stuff. It was, wow, I don't trust it, I can't. First it was virtualization, then it's vMotion, then it's high availability, now it's DRS. And those all things they were all breakthroughs. They were all really interesting technologies that took a while for people to get used to. But they work so well that I think 80% of our customers now run DRS in their infrastructure on an automated mode, meaning these applications just move. It's not alert IT guy, this application needs more resources. We suggest you move these two applications over here to get more resources. It just does it, and people trust it. As you saw from Paul's keynote, there are more vMotions and vMotions associated with DRS than there are planes flying or babies being born or something. The point is there are a lot. Fault tolerance. Another extension of this type of availability solution. This protects you from unanticipated server failure. I guess that's kind of an oxymoron. Of course, you're not going to anticipate a server failure. Protects you from server failure with no downtime. Right? So for very important applications, this does take a bit more resources than something like high availability. But for applications where you cannot stand any failure or any instant of downtime, financial apps, for example, you can create a shadow virtual machine using fault tolerance that will completely mimic the properties of the initial primary virtual machine. And it resides on a different server. So if anything happens to that primary virtual machine, boom, the shadow virtual machine becomes the primary virtual machine with no interruption in access to the end users. And then a new shadow virtual machine is created on another server in that cluster, and you're back protected again for fault tolerance. Really cool technology. Now, the limitation there is that it's for only one virtual CPU right now. So for larger applications that require two more vCPUs or SMP, we're still developing that. Distributed power management. This can help you cut your costs for resources even further. So if you've got spikes in demand, like during the day or during a retail organization's hours of operation, you'd be using your entire infrastructure. But at night, perhaps you don't need all the resources. So what DRS will automatically do is vMotion applications and consolidate them on a smaller number of servers so that you can power down or put into sleep mode the other servers that aren't necessary, save the energy, save the resources, and then in the morning you can power back these applications on this server automatically. So it load balances for power maintenance as well as performance. Profile-driven storage. Now this is something that's really interesting that came out in vSphere 5. Well, what this enables you to do is to tier your storage resources. So here you've got tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, gold, silver, bronze, just an easy way to talk through it. And when you got a virtualization or a virtual machine that you need to virtualize here, and you need to associate it with specific storage, you can have your SLA associated with that virtual machine. The virtual machine will say, okay, or the profile-driven storage will say, okay, which tier would support this SLA, and then automatically deploy that virtual machine where the storage resources meet the requirements of the application. Storage DRS builds on top of that and load balances for storage. We load balance the virtual machines for access to the resources they needed. We can also load balance for storage as well. Now, the majority of our customers who use this currently use it for initial placement of storage files to say there are more resources here. Why don't we place this virtual machine storage files on this LUN, or it will meet the SLA, those types of situations, because load balancing storage can be costly in terms of resources, but you can do it. As this over-marketing slide with someone who really knew how to use PowerPoint shows. And you can see, you can set affinity too. So if you had two hosts, two storage resources that needed to stay together, you can set the affinity so those two will migrate together. So you can see we're getting pretty advanced pretty quickly. But there's a lot of things you can do here. Oh, yeah, marketing. It's probably some guy on my team. All right, performance guarantees, network and storage I/O control. This is really interesting, too, and another way that we guarantee SLAs for application. And another reason why a lot of our customers are virtualizing their Tier 1 applications now instead of just Tier 2 or test and dev environments. Because what happens here for both network and storage resources is it guarantees access to the most important applications. So here in this example, you've got a virtual machine that's wanting to request more resources than are available that is going to starve the other resources or the other virtual machines for access to network and storage. So what this does is allows you to designate certain virtual machines as VIPs. So these are really important applications. Under no circumstances should we starve them of resources for I/O. Then when that virtual machine requests more resources, the VIPs are guaranteed their resources. So our CIO, Steve Herrod, likes to call it the noisy neighbor problem. So you've got a neighbor next to a virtual machine that's hogging resources, starving the most important applications. This solution gets rid of that problem. Site Recovery Manager. Very important for disaster recovery. It enables you to fully plan out and virtualize your site recovery process. So you've got vSphere replication, which is new in vSphere 5. So you can either do storage-based or vSphere-based replication of your infrastructure. If you have a disaster, you fail over. If you need to, once the disaster is corrected, you fail back. And there are some sessions here on DR to the cloud, too, which could enable you to fail over to a cloud service provider if you, as a smaller business, do not have access to a recovery site, which is probably the majority of our customers. So you can fail over to a cloud, stand up your environment in the cloud, and then fail back. Now that's under development, but it's another way we can extend the applications that we have now to meet the requirements of different businesses. Thin provisioning, I could do this all day. There's only a couple more, I promise. Thin provisioning. You don't have to procure or provision the maximum capacity of storage for your applications. You can thin provision those applications, and then as the storage requirements grow, the storage environment will grow to support that requirement. So you don't have to buy an enormous amount of storage in anticipation for the application's growth. Those disks of the data store can grow over time as requirements change. And there's no performance penalty for this. Auto deploy. Remember I said ESXI is only about 80 to 100 meg? Right, that's small. Because it's so small, now you can deploy it in a server's active memory. Pixie boot it, right? So what we do is we take an image profile and a host profile. The image profile for ESX is deployed into a server's active memory. The host profile for the server, which is your standard configuration for a vSphere host, is also deployed, and you can deploy a new server in your infrastructure in 5 to 10 minutes. So it reduces something that even for VMware used to take 5-6 hours as you configure that host and deploy vSphere on it to deploy the hypervisor. Now you can deploy that almost automatically with host profiles and ESXi auto deploy. So adding more physical resources to your infrastructure, enabling all the applications to get the SLAs that they, or meet SLAs. And what can you virtualize and what can't you virtualize? Well, I already gave away that earlier in the presentation, saying that there's nothing you really can't virtualize. ESXi, ESX1, ESX2, you can see on these metrics of deployment, the CPU, memory, network, and IOPS requirement. We continue to grow that over time. But even 3 years ago, when we had VMware Infrastructure 3.5, we were only at 4 vCPUs, 16 or 64 gigs per VM. That was the big size virtual machine at that point, 64 gigs. Networking at 9 gigs per second and about 100,000 IOPS. Now that's what 95% of applications at the time required. But we've continued to scale that. Now with VMware vSphere 5 and ESXi 5, you can have 32 virtual CPUs for one application, for one virtual machine, a terabyte of gig per virtual machine, greater than 36 gigs per second, and over 1 million IOPS. Now that's well beyond what any application requires right now. And that's the point, too, because we want the virtual infrastructure to be tested well beyond what any customer would ever want to use. So we'll continue to push that boundary. But right now, this leaves a very, very comfortable margin of error for any application to be virtualized. And that's what our technical goal was. So what's the end result? You deploy vSphere, you deploy ESXi on a number of hosts, you manage them as a single pool of resources with vCenter, or you create multiple vCenters in linked mode if you really have a large data center. Your data center becomes a resilient private cloud. Now, virtualization isn't the only thing that enables cloud. It's not the only requirement, but it is a main requirement because it enables your data center to act as a single shared pool of resources. It's self-optimizing. Applications are available. It's fault-tolerant, self-protecting, automated, and you can run desktop or server workloads on that pool of resources. So that's the end result of all the functionality that we talked about earlier. You pool your resources into a single utility, and your applications utilize the functionality to become more available, more secure, and more performant than they would in a private environment, all on a 10th or a 20th of the servers that you would require in a physical infrastructure. So now you guys are wondering, how do I get started? Luckily, we've got a free product called vSphere Hypervisor. Now, vSphere Hypervisor is the fully functional, fully scalable ESXi hypervisor that I detailed. The same hypervisor that our customers use in their enterprise data centers to support the most resource-intensive applications. The only difference is that the free version is only for a single server. So if you guys want to play with this in a lab, or some customers use it in tested development environments, it's a very, very performant tool. It just doesn't allow the pooling of resources across a number of servers, you create a virtual infrastructure of one server. But it's fully featured. Here's what you need. Very, very basic hardware requirements. 2 gig of memory, 8 gigs is ideal, 1 NIC. I think the majority of any home servers could support ESXi. How do you install it? Well, it's embedded. If you buy a server where it's there, you can download it. You can get a CD. It fits on a USB drive. There are a number of ways to acquire it. It's downloadable from vSphere or our VMware.com website. How do you get it up and running? Very, very simple. I mean, you won't have host profiles and auto-deploy, but all you do is power on the server, boots into the hypervisor, configure an admin password, connect via the vSphere client. Now, the vSphere client is a GUI interface that's not quite as functional as vCenter, but it will enable you to interact with, create, monitor, manage virtual machines on a single server. And then you connect to the vSphere client and configure an IP address. It's very, very like creating an initial server. Your ESXi host, I said the vSphere client is very simple. It's kind of Outlook-based. You've got your different virtual machines over here, the summary of your existing environment here. So you've got CPU usage here, memory usage here. Pretty straightforward stuff. A lot of our customers can get started on their own, but there are a number of tutorials available as well to get started. Virtual machine console. So within the vSphere client, you interact with the virtual machine the same way you would if it were a physical server. So you log into the client, and it looks like Windows Server. Here's 2003 R2. There are a number of different ways to interact, but this is one very common way to do that via the vSphere client. Point is that it's just like interacting with a physical server. Now, how do you create virtual machines? Of course, we've made that easy as well. You can use VMware Converter to take a physical server and convert it into a virtual machine. And this VMware Converter is the same solution that our enterprise customers use to convert large applications into virtual machines as well. You can create them from scratch, or you can import a virtual appliance. Now, a virtual appliance is another new construct that we haven't talked about yet. And what it is a fully configured package that includes the application and the operating system as one unit. So you download that, deploy it onto the server, point ESXi to it or point vCenter to it, and it recognizes it as a running application. And there's an appliance marketplace with a lot of these applications that can enable you guys to start playing with the infrastructure if you didn't want to use some of your own apps. Now, managing individual virtual machines, you can do everything you would with a physical server. Power on and off, suspend. You capture the state of the virtual machine to disk, and then resume the state afterwards. That's what I was saying. If you wanted to patch something or update something and you wanted a backup before you went through that update in case you need to revert to the old one, you can do that. Snapshot, one-time copy of virtual disks. You can create many snapshots to back up your infrastructure very quickly and easily. Monitoring individual virtual machines, you can see the resources here. Performance, switch to different virtual machines very easily. It'd be best if I could show a demo, but best if you guys just download this and start working with it. It's very, very, very good. Hardware health, very simple. I should tell you guys it's simple 100 times, right? Sorry. But easily upgradable, too. That's another key point there. So if you create virtual machines with the free ESXi hypervisor, and then you want to upgrade to vCenter-powered versions of vSphere, you can do that by just changing the license key. So any virtual machine you create for free ESXi or vSphere hypervisor, you can utilize in an environment that would be managed by vCenter, a fully enterprise-supported environment. The deployment architecture, what do? You just deploy ESXi on each host, add vCenter server to central manage ESXi, and then upgrade the license file to vSphere, which enables the free version to become a paid version. So what are we trying to do? I'll summarize here by saying, with that complete hybrid cloud stack that we've been talking about here at VMware or VMworld quite frequently, the hybrid cloud stack that I introduced in the beginning that includes vSphere, SRM, vCloud Director, and vShield. You pool your compute, storage, and network. Leverage virtualization to start creating that cloud infrastructure. Increase automation through built-in intelligent policy management to ensure that your applications are more available than they would be in a physical environment. Your applications are more secure than they would be in physical. Move from static physical security to dynamic virtual security. And I haven't gone into vShield yet, but I'd recommend that you guys go to a vShield session later on in the conference to get more details, because it's really amazing stuff. And then on top of that, you can create virtual data centers. So here's the example. You have marketing and finance. They have users and policies, virtual data centers, different catalogs of services that users provision on an as-needed basis. What this does is creates the plumbing. The plumbing disappears, and you guys actually get to work on strategic projects that can benefit the business and enable you guys to become business partners, all on a lower budget with lower resources. So in summary, virtualization reduces costs, improves high availability, simplifies operations. ESXI is the hypervisor layer of the virtual infrastructure. You deploy it on a physical server, on bare metal. It becomes a virtualized host that supports not just one application, but 10 or 20. vSphere Hypervisor is the free enterprise version of our hypervisor that enables you to get started, and you can upgrade that very easily to a more robust edition. So with that, I think we've got 10 minutes left. If anyone has questions, you can come to the mic or just come up and I'll talk to you guys. Thank you very much and enjoy the show.